Let's see if we can end this. Midsummer, 1985. Sir, we're preparing to land. Excuse me, but will you please find your seatbelt? Seemed I have fallen fast asleep inside the plane. I finally awoke from my slumber by the stewardess. I only had carry-on luggage on top of it, being a domestic flight, so the time between disembarking and entering the lobby was almost non-existent. Arriving in the lobby, I glanced around looking for Oishi, and was met with a familiar gruff voice calling out to me. Akasaka-san! How many years has it been? Long time, hasn't it? Oishi? Really been a long time. He clapped his hand down on my shoulder, celebrating our reunion. Akasaka, you're looking pretty good, like a bona fide frontline investigator. You're looking quite dapper yourself. Your posture seems a lot better. Is it the ballroom dancing paying off? You should give it a try while you're still young. You'll be a hit with the ladies. Real babe magnet. Oishi retired and moved to Sapporo, and of all the things, he started taking ballroom dancing lessons. He apparently gotten really into it, decided to spend the rest of his new life devoted to the hobby. He was aiming to get his instructor's qualifications before he hit 80, and live out his old age dandily. I let myself into Oishi's car. We headed out towards the hot spring inn. I originally intended to crash at Oishi's place, but Oishi was quite obstinate that his home wasn't suitable for that, so it came to this. At the end, we relaxed while soaking in the hot springs, reminiscing about the time we played mahjong together in Hinamizawa. It seemed that to celebrate our reunion, Oishi had looked for people who could play, but unable to find a suitable candidate, so he had to give up on putting together a table. As we drank together, we excitedly recounted the exploits of the final manhunt. Did it end up catching those two guys? Nope. Oh, look at you! In the end, the search team was never did find them. They were probably hidden by the villagers, sent overseas or somewhere else far away, laying low for a bit. If I remember correctly, you managed to grab one of their guns. Learn anything from that? It's a Chinese-made military pistol, probably from the ones the gang in Kansai managed to smuggle a ton of. I tried to get a match from the rifling, but it didn't show up. What about yours? I was removed from the front lines. I didn't know much, and it seems like everything was settled under the veil of secrecy. Oishi smiled wryly as he sipped his chilled drink. What happened after that sure was tough, huh? 7 years now? Yeah. We held a memorial service a few days ago. I became estranged with my father-in-law lately, so it was rough getting everything ready. Must have been a lot of work. It was then that the hostess brought in extra drinks that we ordered. While the bottles of beer clanked as she brought them in, we halted the conversation. What Oishi meant to say, what Oishi meant when he said it must have been tough. Thinking about that still hard, but time had healed the wound. It was the day after, when I phoned Oishi to apologize. Oishi almost immediately handed the phone to one of my colleagues that happened to be there. Not only was I injured in a brawl, but I disappeared to drink late into the night without leaving any sort of contact information. I thought he'd definitely be mad. All he said was that it was something he couldn't talk about over the phone and that I should come to the station as soon as possible. At the time, I could only think that he must have been really pissed off. When I arrived, he said, "Seems your wife was involved in an accident." Having no idea what happened, I borrowed the phone to contact the hospital Yuki was staying at, After being again in a runaround several times, I was finally able to talk to someone in charge. After mincing words for quite some time, they told me Yuki Akasaka was killed in an accident. The world became a blur as I sat there dumbfounded. Yuki's death was unbelievably abrupt and unbelievably sudden. I could have understood if there was some kind of problem during the birth, but death wasn't anything like that. On the stairs on the way to the roof, she just happened to slip and fell. She just happened to fall in an unfortunate place at an unfortunate angle. That was it. Wanting to blame Yuki's death on somebody, I happened to think that it was an act of revenge of the Defense Alliance. They killed my wife and made it look like an accident. What I learned when I flew back to Tokyo, however, it was more cruel than that. Yuki had a habit of going up to the roof to cool off in the evening. There was an elevator up to the 7th floor, but from there you had to take the stairs to get there. Even late in her pregnancy, when the evening came, she'd always head up there. Her father said for her to not push herself, but Yuki insisted until the time she had no choice but to stay in bed, that she be allowed to do as she wished. I had never once seen Yuki go up there. I only heard that from her father and nurses, because whenever I visited her, she would spend that time with me instead. I heard the reason why Yuki went up to the roof from a nurse she had become friend with. She had said her husband was away on business a lot of time. That whenever he called, she was able to cheer her up and to give her courage. But when he didn't call, she couldn't do that. Her husband might put on a show of bravado, but in reality, he grew lonesome pathetically fast. Probably just the same. Whenever he left for business, not clear when he'd be back, she felt lonely. Whenever she cheered him up, she actually cheered herself up. That's why whenever he went far away for an important job on the evenings, he didn't call. At the very least, she felt that standing underneath the same sky, her feelings would reach him. At that moment, I remember the words that girl told me. It was best I go back to Tokyo right away, or it'd be something I regret. That's it. Because I was away on business, Yuki headed up to the roof. Had I known that this would have been the result, had I dropped, as the girl has said, and dropped everything, and go to Tokyo, I might have been with Yuki on the day she died. If I was with her, she wouldn't have gone up. The day my wife died was on the evening of the 3rd day of my trip. It was right before the time I had the sudden urge to hear Yuki's voice, running around the village trying to find a phone. The girl had gone around and cutting all the phone cords. If she hadn't and I had made that call, I would have undoubtedly learned of Yuki's death at the time, collapsing in tears. Of course, even though the cords were cut, and it only put me off learning her death by one evening. In the end, I have learned of it the next morning. But when I managed to put my emotions in order, I realized that it was the girl's small token of consideration. That's the first time I've heard about that. First time I've talked about it. Could have been a coincidence, though. She doesn't have any special powers or anything. Aren't you the one who told me that she might be the reincarnation of the god Oishi? Well, yeah, the old folks in the village believed that Rika Furude had divine powers. Divine? He originally said it was a joke, but realizing I was serious, he slumped his shoulders. I don't know if it's the truth or not. They say she did things like prophesizing the future, talking about things she should have no way of knowing. She was clairvoyant, divine revelation, all sorts of things. Of course, they couldn't give specific answers or examples. She prophesied Yuki's accident. Oishi tried to laugh it off, but out of respect, he kept her restrained. Does that mean an active and capable investigator from the Metropolitan Police Department believes in divine powers and curses? Having him said that so bluntly, I just couldn't respond. Of course, I had no intention of believing in such odd things, but he could only say that because he didn't know what I did. Since I met that other girl, who both was and wasn't reading Furude, I couldn't deny the existence of any other worldly entity. Of course, I can't deny that it might not have been presence, or rather a warning. If what that girl had said was a warning about the accident, things would become much easier to understand. The line of thinking became, it was a threat. Because I didn't go back to Tokyo, my wife was killed in a way that made it look like an accident. Not satisfied with the investigation into your wife's accident? Of course, I suspected foul play. I poured over the results, even carried my own personal investigation. No witnesses to Yuki's fall. There's a possibility someone had been hiding, wanting to push Yuki downstairs. But the cleaning ladies frequented the roof, hang laundry, and the security cameras on each floor didn't record anything. There wasn't anything set up stairs, so I was unable to find anything suspicious. In the end, even after my personal investigation, I can't think that anything else happened other than a simple accident. Well, of course, there were these guys that took the minister's grandson hostage. It would have been impossible for them to push a lone pregnant woman down the stairs without leaving any evidence. His expression completely sobered up. They murdered your wife? When Yuki died, I thought that as well. I wanted to blame somebody. I created the most viable scapegoat, but without any clear evidence, the violent notion faded along with the wounds in my heart. Did that girl know beforehand about my wife's death and was threatening me? Or did she prophesy that death, offering me a road to salvation? If I had to choose between the two, I would tend towards the latter. He smiled slightly in disbelief as he poured more beer from the bottle. If I may, if what you say is true, she was a prophet that knew the future. Why didn't she predict that disaster if she knew that the gas eruption was going to happen? Why did she remain silent? Ah, yes. Several chapters of this have pretty much covered that. A gas explosion. Well, one of them did, come to think of it. Even a few hours beforehand would have been enough. If the village knew, then most of the people would have escaped without dying. It was near the end of June 1983. The Great Hinamizawa Disaster and Memorandum List. Volcanic gashes of the Onakafuji swamp erupted and hit the village in the middle of the night. An unprecedented disaster where their whole populace was wiped out. A wave of panic about volcanic gas across the country causing people to overreact to reports of odd smells. I haven't heard of the blockade of the Hinamizawa area being lifted. It still should be cordoned off. My turn to be lost for a response. Well, if Rika Furude, the reincarnation of Oishi, was killed, the village might have incurred the goth's wrath, making them call forth the Maya's mother from the swamp to kill everyone. It's places what the survivors are whispering about. Sorry, did you just say she was killed? Yeah. I don't know, it would be a problem if I told you. When I saw the news about the disaster, I remembered the girl. I found her name in the list of victims. Why, at the time I thought her own death she had predicted was due to the gas. It was after that I learned from the tabloids of the series of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa during the 5 years leading up to the disaster that it became known as the Curse of Oishiru. The string of mysterious deaths lined up exactly with what the girl predicted. I'd always thought to ask Oishi about it. He's been involved in that investigation. That's right. That was the reason for our reunion. Right now, Oishi has said Rika Furude didn't die in the disaster. She was killed. Can I ask you about the last year? I may be retired, but I still have to keep things confidential, you know. Excuse me, do you have anything cold that's brewed locally, high grade? I'll leave the selection to you. I didn't mean it that way. He laughed loudly, not wholly unsatisfied, and stopped the hostess to tell her that the cheap booze was fine. I know as much as what was written in the magazines, but I didn't know anything about the curse that happened a year of the disaster. Because the entire area around Hinamizawa was sealed off, you see, Wasn't much of an investigation that could be done over the last year of the curse. Even if after several years the quarantine is lifted, the villagers are mostly dead. What few survivors they were, mostly went to stay with their relatives, their whereabouts mostly unknown. A complete dead end. He seemed to prostrate himself, stared at the ceiling, as if trying to work out a memory from the rusty cogs. He said in a completely sober voice, though. The magazines made it seem like the curse of the 5th year was that disaster, but the actual curse happened the day at the festival. A photographer by the name of Jiro Tomatake. He was the victim. He gestured about how the victim was found tearing out his own throat, or, well, he tore out his own throat with his fingernails. Burned corpse of a woman Tomatake was in a relationship with was found in the mountains of Gifu. The Gifu Prefectural Police weren't very cooperative. I don't know much about it. 2 victims in one night? Well, see, it wasn't just those 2. The next day, Kumagi-kun, one of my subordinates, disappeared along with his car in the middle of the investigation. He was a younger detective that was going to be partnering with Oishi after we first met. He was going around the village questioning people about the incident with Tomatake. Might have gotten caught up in something. If he was with me, he might have been safe. Even now, it still stings. Today, for some reason, I did a real number on my stomach. I had to pass on going around outside. He got too close to the truth and was made to disappear. That's what I think. Kumachao was young. He had a promising future ahead of him, but he still didn't have enough experience on the scene. He wasn't used to dealing with any complications. He limited on the fact that he wasn't with a subordinate that day. The next day, see, you know him as well, Akasaka. Dr. Eerie, remember him? The young doctor from the hospital? I vaguely remember. He committed suicide for sleeping pills for whatever reason. No suicide note or anything. Autopsy confirmed it was sleeping pills. Nothing in doubt except for motive. It isn't that hard to make it look like somebody died from taking sleeping pills, is it? Possibility it was murder? He was single, no prior marriages. Didn't seem like he was going out with anybody in particular. He was the coach of the local junior baseball team and was on good terms with the villagers. He was liked by everybody. I couldn't find anybody who wouldn't want to do him harm. Any chance to investigate were ruined by the disaster. No way to find out anything about him. What about Rika Furude's death? The day of, around noon, some old folks who were visiting the shrine discovered the corpse of Rika Furude. Murder? Before we continue, you should probably stop eating that squid sermon. That bad? The corpse was found on the shrine grounds next to the donation box. She was probably killed somewhere else. Because while she was completely naked, there wasn't any dirt on the soles of her feet. Any sign it was sexual assault? According to the autopsy, there weren't any indication. What we know is that she was rendered unconscious by a drug, carried to that place, had her abdomen sliced wide open. Organs were deliberately removed, scattered about. Unconscious? She wasn't cut open after her death? That's horrible. The girl's prediction was right on the mark.
This day next year, June 1979, on this day, the foreman of the dam construction will be killed. What? For a moment I couldn't comprehend what she was talking about. By the foreman, the gruffle man I was playing mahjong with? Killed? Makes you think that. No answer. But she had the same expression on her face as she did when she declared that the dam project would go away. That wasn't the face of somebody making a forecast or a prediction. Something that was already decided. Well, it was as if she already reported the results. That sort of expression. After being killed in a gruesome manner, the body will be torn apart and disposed of, murdered and dismembered. The next year, June 1980, on this day, Sadako's parents will be pushed to their deaths.
Who's this person? First time I heard that name. I didn't have the courage to interrupt this girl's story.
It might be an accident, an unfortunate one. She smiled faintly, but she wasn't exactly encouraging me to smile along with a lifeless look in her eyes. The year after that, June 1981, parents will be killed. And the year after that, this day in June 1982, her abusive aunt, Sadako's abusive aunt, will have her head split open and die. The year after that, June 1983, possibly a few days afterwards, I'll be killed.
In that case, did she know that her own death would be terrible? Must have been some sort of moment where she wanted to doubt the validity of her own predictions, but as people died exactly as prophesied, as the years passed, that prophecy would have only come closer to fruition. And then facing the final year, unable to struggle against her own destiny, her all-too-young life was snuffed. And in such a cruel way. Knowing that her days are numbered and unable to find the tide of events heralding her end, my heart ached at helplessness. About the way she died, it seems like it wasn't just somebody's sick tastes. I've told you before about how Hinamizawa used to be demons, didn't I? I remember something like that. The festival in the village, Watanagashi, cotton drifting, it stemmed from the drifting of entrails. It came from the man-eating demons ripping apart their victims, throwing their organs into the river. In other words, Hinamizawa pulling out entrails at a religious meeting. This is according to the tales of Hinamizawa, you see. To act as an arbitrator, so that the humans and the man-eating demons could live together peacefully. A god known as Oishi were descended from the heavens. If I recall, she's said to be the living incarnation, wasn't she? Cutting open Rika Furude, a living god, put him into the village, nothing less than absolute sacrilege. Absolute, huh? You mean sacrilege towards Oishiru? The rest you should know, Akasaka. The wrath of Oishiru-sama would have occurred the same night. The Great Hinamizawa Disaster. The official explanation was that some swamp upstream erupted with toxic gas which enveloped the village. The swamp where it erupted was Onikafuchi Swamp, the origin of Hinamizawa's own name, Onikafuchi Village. According to village lore, the deaths of the swamp apparently led to hell, where the man-eating demons came from. Seems too perfect. No. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Without a bit of folklore in the village, if Oishiru will be angry, the cauldron of hell would open up, and miasma will flow out, so they say. To the villagers, hell was at the bottom of the swamp. So basically, miasma poured out, smothering the village. Basically, due to the sacrilegious way that Rika Furude was killed, the village incurred the wrath of Oishiru in the form of that disaster. It seems to be the explanation. You're saying the disaster wasn't natural? Everything does seem to fit together a little too well. If Oishiru's curse did really exist and everything really was just a matter of coincidence, I'll doubt it. A wry smile formed on Oishi's face as I listened to my absurd take on things. He wore an expression as though, even if it were absurd, there was a time he had thought the same thing as well. In regards to the responsibility of the villagers, suppose there was a more frantic following among them. That group created a situation that would incur the wrath, and act the disaster to make it seem like the truth. Of course I wouldn't laugh. I wandered down on my reasoning more than once myself. Great Hinamizawa was a small village. It still had a population of about 1,000. Murder that many people in a single night doesn't seem realistic, no matter how you think. The gas eruption was believed to have happened around 2 a.m. Several hours before dawn. In a short amount of time, going around killing all the villagers in a way to make it look like poison gas, it just couldn't seem feasible at all. The swamp the gas erupted from still had some religious significance, didn't it? If that's the case, maybe there was something set up in the swamp that could have activated whenever a divine verdict was rendered. According to the JSDF press release, the swamp was declared the source of the eruption. After everything was thoroughly looked over by the investigative team. If anything that was set up, I think they would have found it. Wouldn't have necessarily been in the swamp itself. Haven't you heard about it? The old story about how a faraway spring dried up and the village spring dried up as well? What do you mean by that? Many waterways are connected by underground aquifers. Swamps and springs are the only parts that manage to pop up above the surface. So what you're saying is that it's connected to another swamp, maybe a spring? There was something in the village's rigged up long ago that changes the pressure and it causes it to erupt? What you're getting at? He laughed heartily, committing the fact that the youngins had a flexible way of thinking. That was the former detective in him. Even though it was a hypothesis that he didn't come up with, he had the presence of mind to not dismiss it. Interesting theory. If that proves to be true, it would be unprecedented, the largest mass murder in the history of Japan. Once the quarantine in Hinamizawa village is lifted, I think it should definitely be investigated. Do you think you still have any connections with the prefectural police there? Somewhat. I'm an honorary advisor for the judo classes. Even now, I pop by during summer training camps. I don't know when the quarantine on Hinamizawa village will be lifted, but let me help investigate. Got it. How do you feel about the string of mysterious deaths in Hinamizawa they called a curse? At the time, the villagers put a lot of pressure on the station. Official stance on things was that the cases were unrelated. Each case was separate, each its own resolution. Couldn't be. Even though it was blatantly obvious the cases were connected based on the village's religious beliefs. Akasaka, we only say that now because of the rather grandiose ways things ended after 5 years. At the time, those coincidental incidents just happened to coincidentally occur on the day of the festival. And it would be nice if nothing happened this year kind of feel to it. Coincidence, the girl predicted everything from the beginning. Girl? Rika Furude. That child warned me about the incidents that would happen. Akasaka. Is that true? The girl said as much. Next year, the damn foreman would be killed, the corpse would be dismembered. She warned me of events that would transpire the following years. Akasaka, when she told you all that, what year was it? When I met the girl, I was investigating the kidnapping incident, June 78. The year before the dismemberment murder. Wrinkles form on his eyebrows. Closing his eyes, beginning to digest what I just told him. Akasaka-san, if you're wrong about Rika Furude and in the future through some divine medium, it's getting ridiculous. If you're just trying to shock me, I'm gonna be really angry, you know. I'm speaking the truth. The script behind the chain of mysterious deaths was written a year before it even started. And just as predicted, she was killed. First I thought she meant that she would be killed in the disaster, but now that her death wasn't due to that, rather an atrocious one at the hands of a murderer, she said she would be killed. At that point in time, she knew more or less how her own death would occur. Then why did she not try to run away? Even if her death was already spelled out for her. Knowing that, she still had a grace period of several years. Plenty of time to try and run away, or even consult the police. Why did she just accept her death with no resistance? That I don't know. Even though Rika was doted by the villagers, you see, after she lost her parents, she had no really relatives and lived a fairly solitary life, other than hanging around with close friends. Might have been that she didn't have any power to fight or anybody to rely on. She must have tried signaling somebody for help in regards to her own death. You know very well that the village and the police weren't very amicable with one another, Akasaka. At the very least, I never heard anything about Rika seeking protection from anybody. Or it could be she simply resigned herself to be a religious sacrifice. Could have been something like that. No way that was the case. I spoke decisively. She said it.
I want to live happily. That's my only wish. Surrounded by my precious friends, spending our days enjoyably. Only that. I don't wish for anything more than that.
She hadn't given up on life. She hoped to keep on living. At the time, I became dumbfounded. What's the matter, Akasaka? It's nothing. I fell into silence. He folded his arms and began murmuring in contemplation. Eventually, he stood up and headed towards the hallway to find a hostess, yelling he wanted a pad of paper. When Oishi, noisy even though he was just thinking, he left. The room fell into chilled silence. I stood there. I realized I was drunk enough to be unsteady on my feet. When I slid open the window, a beautiful yet somehow ephemeral moon drifted across the night sky. It was just now that I realized she didn't accept her own death. She wanted to keep living happily and joyously. She had said that quite clearly. But I was a fool. I hadn't been asked explicitly. I hadn't realized it. She had made it clear as day she didn't want to die. Wasn't that her cry for help? She didn't say as much as she wanted help. But even given that, it was as though she wasn't looking for salvation. No family, no trust to the police. She just told somebody without any relation to the village, from a faraway place, help me. She'd gone around to cut the phone cords. If I had made that phone call, I probably would have fallen into despair. If I was in that state, even if she was looking for help, her cries would have fallen on deaf ears. That's why, knowing everything, she had cut the phone cords. She wanted even a little time to seek help from me. Just before now, Oishi lamented that one of the young officers got mixed up in the case, having been erased because he wasn't there. I felt the same way. If only I was there, June of 1983, could have protected her. In 1983, it would have been 5 years since the kidnapping. Raising the only daughter Yuki left me, putting all my youth and passion into my work, honing my wits and encourage wrestling with difficult cases. Nothing like my failings during the kidnapping incident would have occurred. I would have been slow to react in a one-on-one fight. I'd be at that point, I'd jump into foreign mafia-run gambling parlors, where I learned to deal with automatic weapons, let alone handguns. I've grown so much that in 1983, I couldn't have been even compared to how I was in 78. That's why if I was by her side, I should have been able to save her. No matter what conspiracy or foul plots drew near, I definitely would have protected her. Even though she sounded resigned, she should have been able to help, to ask me for help. I didn't realize it. I couldn't realize it. Just as I wouldn't have realized it if I was told he was an accident. I wasn't able to realize it. I wanted to cry. If I had taken her words to heart, I would have prevented her accident. I would have been able to protect a girl to whom I owed a debt from even a predetermined death. She must have been expected that from me. I learned about the disaster watching television in my house. Until I learned about that, I had forgotten all about Hinamizawa. In order to recover from the shock of Yuki's death, I tried to remove everything into place from my memory. An ungrateful fool who I was. Even though in exchange for saving her, the girl had told me of a way to save Yuki, unable to accept her gratitude, now here we are. She hadn't died in her sleep from a natural disaster. She was split open, still alive, killed while suffering the disgrace of having her organs torn out. Must have known beforehand that on the day of that year, she'd be killed in a terrifying way. But even knowing what end awaited her, she was all too weak. A lone girl without anybody to rely upon, unable to seek help. Had to swallow her own predetermined death, and left this mortal coil. She wanted to live. She said she just wanted to live happily. That's all she wanted. She didn't ask for extravagant things. For any person that was ever born, it was the very basest of desires. She never said a peep about wanting money, or she wished she was in someone else's situation. She said it, that if all deaths were preordained, hers was probably also according to plan. She must have been a lone, frail girl, but I don't think she would have accepted it all without at least putting up a fight. There must have been, in some small way, some form of resistance that she mustered. And with what she could muster, seeking my help was part of that. God damn it, I yelled. I stomped the floor. Why not I became a police officer in the first place? How could I call myself an officer if I couldn't save a single girl of the misfortune that was awaiting her? Was it because there was so much going on at that time I couldn't process the fact that she was asking for help? That was probably right. I was still green. If I was in that situation now, I would have definitely been able to help her. But it was already over. Even if I wanted to settle the regrets she left behind, Hinamizawa, as a dangerous area, it was still quarantined. Most of the population involved were already dead, with a few that did remain spread around the country, unable to be traced. The stage of that tragedy was still off limits as well. The police investigation was put on hold, the case slowly being buried in the sands of time. Just like how I wouldn't have known unless Oishi asked me about it. Akasaka, you okay? At some point, he returned with a notepad. Until I saw the expression on Oishi's face, I didn't realize I was in tears. I never realized that she wanted to help. Akasaka, calm down. But it's all too late now. She was killed. In such an atrocious manner, she was counting on me, but I couldn't save her. I couldn't. I might also be at fault for not building up an amicable relationship in the village. If Rika had told me about it, I might be able to extend a helping hand. I wasn't able to build up enough trust. That's something I regret. When she said the word trust, it weighed on me even more. Yes, she had given me her trust. She trusted me, meaning that she thought I would have been able to ward off the fate of the foreseen death. She believed in that. I cried. I fell to my hands and knees as I began to brawl. Eventually, he spoke quietly. Akasaka, does it upset you? It does. There's only one way worth mentioning for Rika to have her revenge. Is there a way to do that? He showed me the pen and notebook. In order to properly mount the death of Rika Furude, we have to at least find out the truth. The truth. And not just for Rika Furude. Lots of people died. Their laments must be immeasurable. But their deaths were left unsettled because of the disaster. We can't even investigate them as their memory fades into oblivion. Many people died. The old man was killed. Kuma was erased. Everybody was a victim. But the police can't even investigate it. Who's gonna take care of their party regrets? We can. Akasaka, we'll find the truth. Yes, we'll find it. I've been around every one of the strings of mysterious deaths, knowing all the inner workings of the village. You were told an important truth a year before they happened. We can do it. But they're already dead. That's right. They died. Rika died. You were too inexperienced. You couldn't save her. He grabbed me. I'm a wreck. He lifted me. That's why, to atone for that, we revealed the truth. If what you say is true, all the incidents were part of a grand design. If that's the case, how about we investigate? How we should investigate needs to change completely. I intend to spend tonight summarizing all the information you and I have, and getting in contact with one of my former subordinates first thing in the morning. We're not gonna let the case go cold. We're gonna crack it wide open. Crack it open? Yes, we will. Several years pass, but it's not beyond the statute of limitations. Even if the case had been postponed, it's not closed. It's still going. We're gonna keep it going. Oishi and I vowed to bring the truth of the case to the light, and stood it up. Everything ended in 1985. I at least wanted to apologize. I had searched for a grave. After the state autopsy, her remains were entrusted to one of the shrine's followers. In the future, when the quarantine on the area would be lifted, they would be returned to her family grave. Unsure of who exactly took the remains of Rika Furude until today, I couldn't even apologize to her. In the future, when the quarantine on Hinamizawa was lifted, all I could do was wait until whoever that person is returned to the grave. What I could do right now was not apologize. Instead, until I'm able to meet her again, I reveal the truth and dispel her regrets. Even now, sporadic eruption of gas in the Hinamizawa area meant the prospect of the quarantine being lifted wasn't going to happen anytime soon. It seems likely she had no intention of meeting me again until I find out the truth. That's why the quarantine wouldn't be lifted, or so I thought. Until that day, I grasped the truth. It was the following year. Oishi and I co-authored a book on the string of mysterious deaths leading up to the Hinamizawa disaster. I decided on the title, Higurashi, When They Cry. Because those few days, I was in Hinamizawa. The sound I remembered was the cry of the Higurashi. I could only wish that based on the book, those people involved with that incident could refresh their memories and bring light and new truth. More importantly, that nothing like this ever happens again. I wrote this in the afterword. Why did this tragedy happen? We can't reach the truth by ourselves. If you're reading this, please discover the truth. That is our only wish. Kurado, Oishi, Mamoru Akasaka. This year, the quarantine in Hinamizawa still had been lifted. All cast review session come available. We will check that out later. I'll probably just post it up on VidMe along with the previous one. I didn't get to do the other one. I didn't get to do Chapter 3's after party because I don't think it was included. But anyways, our story has ended. For now.